Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we are going to be tackling the under eyes. I specifically am talking to those of you out there that are over the age of 40, although this can be a problem for many of us. As you get older, the under eyes are so difficult to deal with. We tend to get more dry as we get older. We tend to get a lot more discoloration. Dark circles can become even more of an issue, but we also have a lot of fine lines that we have to navigate. So it's very difficult to brighten up your under eye area in a way that looks natural. It's going to do something without it being too much or looking too heavy. But I have a solution for you guys today. I have two products, or two things I should say, that I do that master the under eye area. One of them is a concealer technique and one of them is an eyeshadow technique. We're going to talk about them today. I'm actually going to be trying out a new under eye product that I'm very excited about. I have a couple of product recommendations that we'll kind of go through and I'll show you guys my trick. But before we do that, if you are new here, very special welcome to you. Please consider subscribing to my channel before you leave and make sure that those notifications are turned on. And with that said, let's get right into it. Okay, so I have my base makeup on, just my foundation, a little bit of powder. I have my brows done, and that is where everything ended. We're gonna jump right into the concealer product. So today I picked up the new Cali Ray Hideaway Concealer. I'm very excited to give this a try. I've been really experimenting a lot with concealers and with color correct. Well, I shouldn't say a lot with color correcting. I've been dabbling into color correcting lately, reading up a little bit more on it. I tried out the Physicians Formula color correctors a couple months ago, as you guys might have seen if you watch many of my videos. And I came across this as a recommendation because this is kind of like a two-in-one. This kind of does a little bit of color correcting and concealing at the same time, which really appeals to me. The idea of doing a color correction and an under eye concealer is a little bit too much for me. I'm much more of a simple girl. So I'm hoping that this product will work well for me, but I have some other concealers that do a similar thing that I'm guessing this might do, that I'm going to go through those recommendations when we get done. So when it comes to the under eye area, especially if you're on the older side, you have very dry under eyes, a lot of fine lines, I think the most important thing is to find the right concealer formula. I like something generally that's relatively thin, that is going to have really high coverage, but it's not too heavy or cakey, doesn't move around too much. And the second most important thing is where you place it. Where do you actually need the concealer? If you guys remember the videos back in the day where someone would do like a full, I'm sure some people still do this, and some people might be able to get away with doing this. I am certainly not one of those people, but where someone does a full swipe of concealer, like almost like a triangle here under your eyes, no, that is not going to work for me or anyone that has a lot of fine lines under the eyes and dry under eyes or is a little bit older. That is way too heavy. I cannot get away with using that much product. So I have to use a tiny amount and be very strategic about where I place it. This might be a little bit different for everyone, depending on what type of discoloration you have, how severe your under eye circles are, and where they are. For me personally, I tend to get some under eye shadowing kind of right, a little bit right here, starting here, and just in this little pocket right there. Other than that, the rest of my under eye area, as you guys might see right now, I have a little bit of foundation, but my foundation kind of ended right here. I don't have a lot of discoloration right here, with the exception of a couple of hyperpigmentation marks right in this area here, but I'm really more specifically talking about this inner area that tends to get dark and kind of saggy as we get older. That's the hardest part in my opinion. So I like to just place the tiniest amount of concealer just a little bit in this, like, kind of, I call it a little pocket. It's like a finger pocket right there, and right here as well, just in this little corner. We're gonna do that with this concealer today. By the way, these Cali Ray Hideaway concealers, they do have different shades that serve kind of a different function depending on what your skin tone is and what kind of discoloration issues you have. I recommend going on either the Cali Ray or Sephora website and kind of reading up on these, because they do have some information on there what shade might work best for you. I ended up going with the shade Pale Sun, which I think was like the second lightest shade. I think there was one that was a little bit lighter than this. It was more of a pink that had cooler undertones. For my skin tone, I do have more of a warm undertone in my skin, and I also like to put something that's slightly warmer in these areas here because mine are kind of cool. They're a little bit more like the purpley blue side. Again, this is something that might vary depending on what you're working with. So I'm gonna take a little bit of this and just put some right here in that little pocket and some just right here in that little kind of line that you guys can probably see. I'm also going to use this to brighten up my eyelid today. Part of my second tip for a bright eye and under eye area, it has to do with an eyeshadow technique. So I recommend putting some concealer on your eyelid. I hope this one will work for me today. Most concealers will work on my eyelids as long as they don't move around too much, but usually ones that, especially nowadays, I feel like most concealers are pretty good at setting down. And fortunately, I do have very dry lids, so I don't get as much creasing as I did back when I was younger. Okay, that did a really good job. So I like something that has more of a yellow undertone, which is why I was really excited to hear about this concealer. These are relatively new. I think Kelly Ray came out with these back in February. I've heard a couple people recommending them and talking about them, and it just sounded like something I would really like for my under eye area. Do you guys see what a difference that makes? Look at that. Wow, that's a huge difference. And I did not have to use very much product at all. The reason I don't like to drag my product all the way across my under eye area, you guys see as I smile, these are all the kind of fine lines, smile lines, and crow's feet that I get are kind of in this area right here. So I try to keep that area almost completely bare of any product at all because it will start to look heavy, things might start to settle, and I really just don't need the coverage right there. If you happen to have some hyperpigmentation marks in that area, just be very strategic about where you place or cover them or how you cover them rather than just swiping a full swipe of concealer in that area. Just put a tiny dot where you need it and blend it out very precisely. By the way, today I'm using this concealer brush from Angie Hot and Flashy and BK Beauty. This is a newer try to me, but I have fallen in love with this. It does a fantastic job at blending your concealer. You can also use your finger or a damp sponge. I think this gives you just a little bit more coverage. If you do have creasy eyelids, you may want to set that down. I'm gonna kind of leave it be for now and kind of see, just to see how this concealer kind of settles. Let's go over to the other side, and then I'll give you guys a couple of recommendations if you don't have this concealer, you are maybe looking for something drugstore. I have a couple that I really love that do something similar to this. There we go. Wow, what a difference that makes. That's a really nice product, very good coverage, really nice and pigmented. So far, so good. But if you don't have this concealer, there are a couple others that I would recommend. For me personally, for my skin tone and the type of under eye discoloration that I'm dealing with, I like something that has either a yellow or kind of peach base to it. And I also like something that's going to be brighter than the rest of my skin tone. So I like picking a concealer that's a shade or two lighter than the rest of my face because it's really gonna help to brighten up that area. A couple other ones from the drugstore that I love are this one from Flower Beauty. This is the Flower Beauty Serum Concealer. This is the shade Ivory. Let me just swatch these on the back of my hand for you guys. You can kind of have a look at what shades we're working with here. So this is the Kelly Ray one. This is seriously impressive pigment. I mean, even compared to some of the drugstore ones that I'm gonna be swatching, I can just tell. This is a really interesting product. I'm excited to keep playing with this. But I do also love my Flower Beauty. You'll see this one is also very light. It has more of a peach base to it. I know these are super light and my lights are kind of bright, so I'm trying to angle them off to the side. Hopefully you guys will be able to see. Maybe I'll insert a close-up here after we are done. Next is one of my absolute favorite drugstore concealers, especially for this similar purpose, and it comes from Physicians Formula. It's their Butter Glow Concealer. This is the fair to light version. If you have really fair skin, you guys, this is one of the, I imagine, best concealers for very fair skin tones ever. It's very, very slightly yellow, which I know that's probably not gonna work for everyone, but for the under eye area, if you have blue under eye dark circles or just discoloration there, I think having something with a bit of yellow in it can really help to kind of counter that cool blue or purple under eye circle. But this is such a light color and it's very pigmented, so you don't need to use a lot of it. I bet that would be fantastic for someone that has even lighter skin tone than me, which I think can be hard to find. It's hard to find. I have friends that have very, very fair skin. Mine's more like light medium, but they have a very hard time finding drugstore concealers that are light enough for them. So that would be a good option. And then last is this one, very affordable. This is from Essence. This is the Keep Me Covered Concealer. I have the shade 50 Warm Shell. Again, this one has just a little bit of yellow in it. You guys will see a theme here. There's a reason that these are ones that I like to reach for on a regular basis because they're all a little bit warm and they're all a shade or two lighter than the rest of my my skin. So that's what I recommend, regardless of what your skin tone is. Pick something that's going to counter that shadowing that you have and that's going to brighten things up, so that's a shade or two lighter. But just be careful not to place it too broadly, because I just think that looks a little unnatural for me personally when you put something too bright in this whole area here. I'm not a big fan of that look. I like something that's kind of just more strategically going to brighten. So now let's move on to my second tip, which is to use an eyeshadow on top of that concealer, especially here on this inner part of your eyelid. Now we've kind of countered the dark circle. Now it's about brightening up your entire eye area, and I like to do that on this inner corner of my eyelid right here. I have such a great product for that that's very hard to find, but I've been trying to find a dupe and I found something close that we're gonna try out and use today. But this shadow right here, I've talked about quite a few times here on my channel. It actually comes from a palette from Sydney Grace from their Tropical palette. This is the shade Coconut. It's basically a satin finish, buttercream white. It's just extremely pigmented. It has the tiniest amount of sheen. It's not too glittery or chunky or sparkly, but it has a ton of pigment in it and kind of a white base that's slightly warm, which I love because it really brightens up that area without it adding like a cool base. I do sometimes like using a matte white or even something like this from About Face. This is their white fluid eye paint. This works okay, but the problem with something that's just pure white, if you have blue discoloration, if it's a little bit on the sheer side or as you kind of blend it out, the white almost can emphasize that cool blue, whereas having something that has a little bit of warmth in it is going to counter that blue and brighten things up in a better way, which is why I love this shadow right here. I've been on the hunt to try to find something to duplicate this. I haven't found something exact, but I found a good alternative that I picked up recently that are going to mimic that shadow and do the same thing. There are some shadows from Sephora, so we're actually going to use two of these today. You could use one or the other. These are both quite pigmented. This is a matte shadow. This is the shade Lazy Afternoon. This kind of reminds me of Brulee from Wet n Wild. Do you guys remember that single shadow from Wet n Wild that people raved about years and years ago? I think I decluttered. I had a couple of those. I used to use them all the time. I've since decluttered them. I think this one might be a little bit more pigmented than I remember that one being. As you can see, this one has more of like a peachy warm base, but it definitely would work if you are wanting something to kind of brighten. So I've been alternating between these two shades. This one also right here, not quite exact to my beloved Coconut right here. This one's more of a yellow. This one has more of like a pink hue to it, but I wouldn't call it cool. This is No Place Like Home. I love the finish of this one. It might have a little bit more sparkle. I wouldn't say that. Actually, no. It's not sparkly. I wouldn't even call it a true metallic, but it has a bit more sheen than the Coconut shade does. So here we have the matte. This is the one with some sheen in it. There it is right there. And let me swatch next to those, the Coconut from Sydney Grace. If I ever find an exact dupe for this specific shade, I will let you guys know. I don't know if you can tell. This one has just a little bit more yellow in it. These ones have more of like a peachy pink, but they're still relatively warm. So you could use either of these shades. Today we're gonna layer them on top of each other for maximum brightness, but you really could pick one or the other. They're both quite pigmented on their own and will give a similar effect, but we're gonna start with the matte shade right here. You can use your finger to do this. I recommend either your finger or a flat brush. This is the Angie Hot and Flashy A505. By the way, update on the concealer. It's definitely moving around just a little bit, but you can just tap those lines out before you go in with your shadow. So I'm just gonna pack a bit of that matte Lazy Afternoon shade on my brush, and we're going to just start right at this pocket right here, place most of the shadow there, and go kind of up into this, like right below. I don't mind leaving a little shadow right there because we want to keep that contouring of your nose, but just like high on that inner part of the lid and really cover up that inner third of your eyelid with this matte shade. If you want to add a little bit here on the inner corner, you can, but most of that has already been countered with our under eye brightener and concealer. Okay, do you guys see how bright that inner lid is? I know it looks a little bit crazy right now because I don't have any other eye makeup on. If you wanted something a little bit less intense, if you don't want that level of brightness, you could definitely use a fluffy brush rather than using a packing brush. It'll look a little bit more natural, but trust me, once I get the rest of my eye makeup done, this is just gonna look so bright and amazing. I'm gonna add a little bit of the shimmery shade on top of that just to show you guys kind of what the sheen looks like, kind of the difference between the matte. Actually, before I do that, why don't we finish off with the rest of my eyeshadow, and then you can kind of see what it looks like matte versus with some shimmer. So we're gonna just dip into this palette right here. This is just the Nude Mood palette from ColourPop. I'm just gonna do some basic shadowing in the outer, through my crease, just to add a little bit of dimension to my very plain looking eyelids right now. Normally I do this step first, but you can definitely do it last, especially if you're doing something more subtle and just kind of basic. Add just a little bit of this shade right here, just right to the outer corner. All right, that's all I'm gonna do for my eyeshadow today. Now I'm just gonna add a little bit of liner and mascara, just do a baby wing on my outer corner and add a little bit of mascara. Then I'll come back and we'll finish off with the shimmer on the eyes. Then we'll finish off with the face and I'll show you guys just the finished look and go over a couple of final tips and recommendations. Okay guys, I'm back. I decided to do the rest of my makeup off camera. Felt like I was talking a little bit too much. Maybe this video was getting too long. So everything that I used or am wearing, I will list down below. But this is the finished look, just with that matte shade on the inner corner. Look at that bright under eye. Can you see why I'm so obsessed with this method? I just feel like it really brightens up your whole face, regardless of what type of makeup look you're doing. If you're doing something really simple and natural on the eyes, maybe just some mascara and liner, or more of a dramatic look, just having that little section right there nice and bright, both on the lid and also on the under eye area, makes a world of difference. So last, I just want to go back to that shimmery shade that I mentioned, No Place Like Home. And we're gonna just apply a little bit of this right on top of where we put that matte shade. We could have just started with this shade alone and basically got this same effect, but I wanted to show you guys how you can do this with a matte or with a shimmer, as long as it's nice and bright and a little bit on the warm side, especially tends to work well if you have some blue discoloration. So this shade, we're just gonna pop right in this section right here. I'm not gonna drag it all the way across my lid. Like, especially if it's really bright and white based, that can be a little bit too intense. Just keep it kind of right in that very innermost corner. And I'm not even going down below. You could, if you want to apply this like on the inner tear duct area, you could do that. I'm not really gonna do that today. Sometimes I'll do that, but there we go. Look how bright that is, you guys, wow. But I love how this look and technique really brightens up your face. I will link all of the recommendations as far as concealers go. Really, it's not even about the specific concealer recommendations, just finding the right shade. That's gonna be a couple shades, maybe 1.5 to 2 shades lighter than the rest of your skin or even your body. To brighten up that area, find a formula that has high pigmentation, that's not going to move around too much. I have so many that I love, both high-end and drugstore, that can work for this. But I will link all of the products I mentioned and recommended down below for you guys in case you're interested. So quick update on the Hideaway Concealer. I did notice just a tiny bit of settling in some of these lines right here. I noticed some settling on my eyelids. Now that I have my eyeshadow on, it's been about 20 minutes since I finished the rest of my makeup. I don't notice any settling. So just once you see a little bit of that settling initially, you might need to tap it out. And then I think you'll be good to go, especially if you're on the drier side. If you're more oily, you may want to set this with powder, but I am very impressed. I mean, even when I look down, which sometimes like things look good when I'm here, but when I go here, you start to see that shadowing again. I can't even see it. This did a fantastic job for countering that blue under eye area. I hope that you guys found this video helpful for those of you that struggle with the under eye area. I think more than anything, the biggest tip I can give you is keep things very, very strategic and simple, and don't overdo it, try to overcorrect the entire area when it's really just small areas that you need to kind of focus on and correct for. You can see that just that tiny bit of product I put just right there and on the lid made a huge, huge difference in brightening up my entire face without kind of swiping things everywhere. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you have any feedback or product recommendations, let us know down in the comments below. But that is going to do it for now. Let me remind you one more time, if you are not yet subscribed, please do that before you leave, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.